Hi Bonnie, how you going?
Good.
We heard that you were in Australia for a little bit, so we thought we'd catch up some time with you and have a chat to you about your adventures in roller derby. What were some of the things that you studied to become a better coach?
I studied every coach that I ever had. I think the first thing that I did was I thought about every coach that I ever had. And the natural thing was to imitate what those coaches did. And I had a bunch of mean man coaches growing up. I was in soccer, and most of my coaches were mean men. That's the easiest way to put it. They were like, you know, just the traditional, come on, maggots, let's get this done. And I guess maggot means something else where I am than it does here, but it didn't work. So that was the first thing that I figured out. When I tried to imitate the form of coaching that I had been subject to, it didn't work. Women don't like that. They shut down. They can't thrive in that type of environment. And so first I learned adaptively. That was the very first way I learned, wow, I don't like it when I come to practice and everyone hates me. Like, I still have to be on a team with these people, even though I'm a coach today. And they didn't like it. So the first thing I did was learn adaptively. And then I learned anticipatorily by studying the craft, by finding books and interviews and articles on successful coaches, and then listening to how their team members felt about them and figuring out which ones were not only successful, but also respected and enjoyed. And so I kept coming back to Phil Jackson and John Wooden. And there's other great examples, sure, but those two I just kept coming back to and then just devoured anything having to do with them, because I felt like these guys get it. They get that they're dealing with human beings, with human emotions and issues and egos, and especially on the highest level in male competition. And they didn't abuse their team members. And I felt like I got it. Like, I got what was most important from studying those guys. And then just from a lot of observation. And when I started to ask questions, not just tell people what to do, but when I really started to ask questions and then post surveys where people could say what they wanted anonymously and send that back to me, like, it's anonymous. This is an anonymous poll. You can say whatever you want about me and my coaching. And that's when people got really honest with me. So I was able to, after I would wipe my tears and dust my shoulders off, because people would be so brutal in an anonymous environment, I was able to take in what they said and be like, okay, certain things that I do suck and I need to stop doing them, but there's other things that I'm doing that are working and I'm going to do those even better. Because so much of coaching is just hearing and being heard. That's 75% of it. The actual relaying of information is only 25%. Like, the information itself isn't as crucial as, can you hear me? Do I hear you? Do we understand each other? Like that, with coaching women, that was everything to me. And the relaying of information is just take a big concept and make it tiny bites. And that part was natural for me because I was a slow learner. So I understood things have to be done in baby steps. Like, that was natural and that was easy. It's the leadership and the listening aspect that was learned. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you're renowned as one of the best coaches in roller derby and also one of the most inspiring coaches in roller derby. So whatever you did, you studied well, clearly, and you've transferred it well. In terms of, so you touched on briefly feedback and feedback being a part of coaching.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions or insight into good ways to give feedback well?
Yeah, feedback is really, I think the best way to explain it is as it's a present. Because if you see something that someone could improve upon, chances are they haven't seen it yet because they don't see themselves. But how you want to give someone a present is really the crux of the whole thing. I mean, almost nobody likes a present hurled at their head. You sort of have to be like, would you like a present? I mean, I call it the vampire rule. You've heard me talk about that. I have the vampire rule where I have to be invited, but I can stand at the door and ask if I can come in. So no one wants to be like surprised with their flaws and their faults. Like you already live with flaws and faults every day. It can be crippling at times. And so if you can ask somebody like, hey, I saw something, do you want to hear it or do you not want to hear it? If someone says no, walk away and that's it. Give them a chance to potentially come back and say, okay, well, I wasn't ready for it right then. What was that thing? And if they say yes, then cool, you got permission and you can give it to them. But if you just come at people with what their faults are, it's like, there's enough of that in life. And people come to roller derby for a release, an escape, and something positive. And so you sort of have to consider what your individual impact on other people is. And your approach really defines that. So as long as you're seeing it as a present that, you're offering, I feel like 9 times out of 10 people do want presents. Mm-hmm. They just want you to ask first.
And what about receiving feedback? Do you have any insight about how to receive feedback?
It's very hard not to get hurt over stuff like that. Even if you said, yes, I want it. I've done this experiment where I ask people, like, I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want first? And like 10 out of 10 say bad news. And I usually don't have any news at all. I was like, I was just wondering. And you can see their shoulders fall like, oh, thank God I didn't want any bad news. And I feel like getting feedback sometimes feels like bad news, no matter how well it's delivered. And so you sort of like, for me, I know that like I sort of expected it to hurt and accepted that it would hurt. And then I considered what my impact on this person was. And I'd be like, okay, ouch, but I'm going to take that in and think about what you said. Mm-hmm. And that is just as raw and honest as you can really make it, where it's like, okay, like that stings a little, but I'm going to think about what you said, which is true. Whether you want to or not, you will think about it. So you might as well just say that and not feel obligated to give a positive or negative answer, but just, okay, I'm definitely going to think about what you said. And then if you come back and follow up with someone, like, okay, that was cool, and like, thanks for telling me that. Like, that's just a good human attribute. But it doesn't take the sting away from hearing about your flaws and faults. I mean, that's always going to sting a little bit. Almost nobody is just like, come on, hit me. I really want to be torn apart emotionally today. Like, almost nobody wants that. But if you can just sort of keep into perspective that every single person walking on the planet is a work in progress, and you're not expected to have all the answers and have everything figured out today. But you can't get to the vision of greatness that you have without both internal and external feedback. I mean, these are things that intellectually are very easy to digest and emotionally are very difficult to process. So it's sort of like you give yourself a little bit of space by saying, okay, I'll think about that. And then you get a chance to process it and become, the intellectual genius that you are, where you realize that could only be a good thing if someone's brave enough to share that with you.
And something that's always resonated with me was thinking about receiving feedback as a gift in the same way of giving feedback, I think, as well. Mm. So reframing the way that we accept it so that it can be a really positive thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's so rare that someone really wants to hurt you. Like, even if they're hurtful, it's so rare that someone's like, oh, I'm going to tell her how she can get better. That'll really mess her up. You know what I mean? Like, they want you to be better, whether they like you or don't like you. They want you to be better. And ideally, you would want that too. It just hurts a little.